Just 800 million years after the Big Bang, clouds of gas and dust coalesced under the force of gravity and formed a bright, dense disk of stars. Billions of years later, our own solar system spun into being inside this disk. And it is that disk, our home, that is the subject of the LEGO Art Milky Way set, a uniquely textured 3D piece of artwork that you may be starting to build as you listen to us right now, capturing some of the most fascinating points of interest from across the 100,000 light years or so of our galaxy. And it's that galaxy that our guests and I will be discussing today. My name is Jack Gardner-Varr, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by two foremost figures of the final frontier. The first is Camille Bergin. Since graduating from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville in aerospace engineering, Camille has forged such a successful career that she now sits on the alumni board of advisors for that same institution, having worked on a variety of cutting-edge space technologies, including for NASA's Artemis program. You may know her from her online platform of the Galactic Gal, which has attracted well over 500,000 followers, just slightly ahead of my own tally of 14 followers, helping Camille carry out her mission to make aerospace accessible and to empower young women to pursue STEM. Camille, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
And we are also delighted to be joined by Dr. Maggie Aderin-Pocock, Chancellor of the University of Leicester and one of the most prominent science educators of our time. As well as working on countless satellites and research projects, Dr. Aderin-Pocock has brought science to the public as the face of multiple BBC programmes and through her own company, which aims to inspire kids with science. She was made a Dame by King Charles III in the 2024 New Year's Honours List for her incredible contributions to science education and diversity, which leads me to my first question. As someone who's never addressed a Dame before, how should I refer to you?
See, when you say Dame, I think of pantomime.
Okay.
So, yes, I'm still getting used to the title,
yeah.
But Maggie is great.
That's good. That makes life easy for me. And Camille, for fairness and balance, is there a title you would like to be referred to?
No, I'm not that
cool. I know. Oh, yes, you are.
Well, Galactic Gal.
Galactic Gal throughout. But I was wondering if you guys had a particular moment that you can remember where you realised that you were going to be spending your life in this sort of field, exploring space and studying space. And
we lived in Florida. I got to see a space shuttle launch. It was December 5th, 2001.
I'm envious.
I remember. But I just I was so fascinated. I mean, I was 4 years old, but I was so fascinated by humans, like our ability to just build something that can launch humans safely above our atmosphere, above our planet. And these humans are away from every other human that's ever existed.
Yeah.
And then from there, I just kind of like deep dived into a lot of space things, a lot of sci-fi movies, thanks to my parents too. Yeah. It did take me a little bit of time to like actually feel confident enough to pursue this as my career because, you know, growing up as a young woman in STEM in the early 2000s, there weren't a lot of like resources like we have now. To be able to see somebody like me doing aerospace engineering. But yeah, so that was kind of my moment.
That's interesting. I will definitely come on to sort of like women in STEM and the sort of state of aeronautics and such. But I can't even imagine at such a young age seeing something like that, and I can completely see the inspirational sort of like value of seeing a rocket launch into the space. Was there a similar moment?
Like,
Sorry,
I want to be an astronaut.
I know. Yeah.
I'm going up there.
Was there a similar sort of like moment for you, Maggie? Or was it more sort of gradual?
Well, actually, no. My problem is I can't remember a time when I wasn't interested in space. Right. So for me, space got me right from the get-go. And because I heard about the moon landings and that sort of fascinated me. And sort of the whole buzz around that. And then...
I see you.
You see what I did there? And then the things... It was lots of... I have a condition called dyslexia. And so I didn't, reading books at school were just boring and I didn't like reading, but sci-fi got me and sci-fi made it worth reading. I once gave a talk, how sci-fi saved my life because it made things worth reading.
But it's so interesting hearing that there's both elements of fiction in terms of that have inspired you both, in terms of sci-fi, which is good because there were definitely going to be some non-scientific sci-fi-esque questions later on in the podcast. So
we shall look forward to those.
I don't feel so bad about asking them now.
My favourite.
Yeah.
Yes. I think science fiction is really important.
Yeah.
I think it inspires many scientists to do what seems impossible sometimes. So, yeah, I think science is part of the DNA of being a scientist.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree.
What is your favourite part of the Milky Way galaxy? I don't know who wants to tackle that one first. You got to be careful someone doesn't say something silly and then someone says something really profound. I can start with a silly one if you like.
I mean, my favorite part of the Milky Way is us. Yeah. Honestly, like there's nothing like us. It's so cliche, I know that, but it's also so important. We are the chances of us being here on this planet, and especially in the form that we have evolved into and the civilization we have created, is so rare.
Yeah.
Like a tiny fraction of a percent, it's ridiculous how, lucky we are to be here in this time. But and just how beautiful humanity is. We have a lot of our problems, as does everything, and I'm sure if there are other aliens out there, I'm sure they have their own problems. But we also have this like really beautiful capacity to innovate and explore and make things better for all of us.
Lovely. Maggie, you got to...
I'm going to go for the silly one.
Pressure now.
So actually, it leads on from what Camille was saying, because one of my favourite views of the Milky Way is from the Southern Hemisphere. If you go to the Southern Hemisphere, you actually look into the heart of our galaxy, because that's directed towards the heart of our galaxy. So you look into the heart of our galaxy. And so I've been lucky enough to work on some fantastic places like the VLT, the Very Large Telescopes. It's on a mountain in the Atacama Desert, driest place on Earth. Yeah. And you sort of look up at the night sky. Also places like Uluru in Australia. Beautiful skies. And here, when you see the Milky Way, it really does look like a band across the sky. I don't get anything like here, living here in the UK. You don't see it because you're not looking at the heart of the Milky Way, also light pollution and everything. But what I really like about that is because... when people, the Aboriginals, looked up at the Milky Way and saw all those stars, they didn't make constellations like people of Europe did, do the dot to dot with stars. What they did is they looked at the clouds of dust within the Milky Way, and they came up with animals like the emu and things like that. And so I think that is the diversity of human creativity.
Yeah.
Because when we look up, we see different things. So some people see, Orion, the warrior. Some people see the clouds of dust and see see a sort of an emu. And I think that is the other thing, that astronomy truly is for everyone. When I was growing up, I thought astronomy was done by white guys in togas because it was all about the Greeks and it was all about the Romans. But every culture across the world has looked up and wondered what's out there, and created stories and just used the art, the science, mixed it all together. And so I think that is the view I love of the Milky Way, because it shows a very different perspective than the one I was brought up with, where people are looking at the clouds of dust in the Milky Way and seeing the significance of them, rather than, oh yes, here are the stars, and let's look at this. So it's and I think space gives you a different perspective.
Yeah. Humans have always been mesmerised by the faint band of light composed of our galaxy's disk of stars. In ancient China, this was referred to as the River of Heaven. Cherokee people told tales of a dog who spilt stolen cornmeal across the sky and thus called it Where the Dog Ran. It reminded the ancient Greeks of spilt milk, and from that grew the term the Milky Way. And all these stories are, I think they're quite a good reminder as we begin that the version of our sky that most of us are familiar with, including the names as the most basic thing, it's not the same sky for all of us throughout history, is it?
So we see the stars as sort of forever, and we see them as sort of not moving, not changing. But of course, we have this collection of stars within our Milky Way galaxy. 300 billion stars is estimated, which is a mind-boggling number. And the things, they're moving around the galactic centre, so they all move, but on astronomical timescales. But if you take a constellation, a well-known constellation like Orion, we have that many people have spoken about Orion. Many different cultures have spoken about that collection of stars. But if about another 500,000 years, Betelgeuse will go shooting off, and Orion won't be Orion as we know it today. So these stars are moving and sort of making an orbit around the galaxy. Another thing to say about constellations is they're not fixed things of stars. They're not actually star patterns at all. It's just random stars that we have smushed together, but they're all at different distances and things like that. So and that's why they move in different ways.
But that's exactly it. It's sort of, you look up and you sort of think that Orion is, constant and forever. Do we still use the constellations as a mapping principle or a guideline, or have we sort of advanced a little bit beyond that?
So in terms of like a spacecraft, we actually do have things called star trackers, and it helps us figure out like where in space our spacecraft is pointing. And it's kind of like a little GPS in space, if you will. Now, we also do use GPS for these satellites, and GPS themselves are satellites. So I could keep going on and on, but absolutely. But I also think it's just like, it's a huge part of like human culture still, right?
Yeah, I do love that the cutting edge, your high-tech spacecraft that we build today still navigate by the stars. Yeah. And so, there is this sort of I love that story arc that astronomy truly is for everyone. It's every culture. We still use the technology today. It is truly for everyone.
Yeah, I love that. It's weirdly romantic. I don't know why. But it's lovely. So before we go any further, let's start at the beginning. How exactly was the Milky Way formed?
It's quite interesting because if you look at sort of planet formation or star formation, what you usually do is you get a large cloud of gas. And I'm talking, when I say, see, that's the problem. When I say large, I'm talking large on an astronomical level. So, these are many, many, many light years across. And this cloud or this nebula is made out of sort of dust and gas. And then maybe a star goes supernova. It sends a shockwave through this and things start to clump together. Right. So that's how stars are formed, and that's how sort of our planets are formed. But we're talking now on a much, 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 much bigger scale. Because as I say, 300 billion stars in our galaxy. And so we're talking about sort of huge nebulae. Yeah. And they they start clumping together, stars form, the stars start sort of clumping together. It's all an act of the force of gravity, this attraction between masses. And so, yes, you start getting these star formation, and they sort of swirl around each other. And if you go back to the early universe, you've got sort of these clumps of stars which were more like sort of spheres. But then what happened is, as they migrate and move through the cosmos, they start colliding together. And so you might get two of these galactic clusters sort of coming together. And I've seen computer images of this happening. And so you get two galaxies actually converging. And you'd think there'd be some carnage and smashing and things like that. But because the space between stars is so big, they actually sort of swirl through each other, and it's like a beautiful dance.
Is that? And then you get. Is that why we're in a? Is this why we've? Is this the spiral formation? Is that related to
yes,
that?
And so as they come together, and so the early galaxies were mainly these sort of globular clusters, but as they sort of started swirling together and sort of amalgamating, more and more of these galaxies came together. We start getting these bigger and bigger sort of conurbations, right. And that's how we got the galaxies we have today. Yeah. And so that's why we think our Milky Way galaxy was actually a combination of many of these smaller galaxies, which is flowed together to make the big galaxy we have today.
Wow. And Camille, how big is our galaxy in compared to like other galaxies around there? Do we know?
Big, sums it up.
So I mean, is it big? Is it really? Is it really like? Is it unusually big?
Yes, but one of the challenges we have with our Milky Way galaxy is we can't actually image our own galaxy.
Yes.
Now, that sounds weird, but I always like to compare it like it's like a T-Rex, a Tyrannosaurus Rex, trying to take a selfie of itself. Right. Because I don't know, a Tyrannosaurus, it seems like an odd analogy, but a Tyrannosaurus Rex, has really diddy arms. And so it can't hold the phone far enough away from itself to take the photo. And we have the same thing, because our galaxy is so big, we can't get far enough away to take images of our whole galaxy. Yeah. So we can look through our galaxy, we can look at the galactic sort of centre, we can do things like that. And so we look at other galaxies and think, our galaxy is probably a bit like that, spiral arms, things like that. But we don't actually image our own galaxy from the outside because we can't get far enough away to do that. On average, our galaxy, if you look at the sort of the mass and things like that and how things are moving, I think it's about average sized, really. Nothing special.
Just average. But this leads me on to sort of my next questions in terms of like how we observe our universe and stuff. And we're moving on to now the Gaia telescope. Yes. So this is actually one of the first things that the builders of the Lego art set make, this Gaia telescope. It's launched by the European Space Agency in 2013. And it just seems, reading about it, not knowing much about it, that it sort of changed the game regarding our observations of our own galaxy. So, Camille, what exactly is so revolutionary about the Gaia telescope?
Oh my gosh. Well, so it's so important that I'm actually just going to read straight from the ESA website because I think they do the best job talking about it.
Yeah.
It's building the largest, most precise three-dimensional map of our galaxy by surveying nearly 2 billion objects. So while we can't image it like a T-Rex taking a picture of itself, we can actually, measure the stars in all these 2 billion objects that the Gaia telescope is monitoring. We can measure their positions and how they're moving. And then, over time, it creates a three-dimensional map of our galaxy to help us understand, like, what is it truly made of? What else is out there? How are we formed? Helping us to answer all of these questions.
One of my favourite facts about Gaia, one of the things I was able to actually go and see, one of the things that Gaia has is it has a huge, we call CCD, a charge coupled device, but it is like a camera. And the camera is about, well, actually I would say feet. So it's about 0.5 metre across. It is absolutely huge. And this is how it actually surveys all these stars. And because it's looking at sort of the position of a star, and then it will go back to the same star and look at the position again, we can actually look at the trajectory of the star. And that shows us how our galaxy is evolving. And before Gaia, I used to go out and say, yes, there's sort of 200 billion stars in our galaxy. And then when Gaia started doing the survey, we realised it was actually closer to 300 billion. So we were 50% out in the number of stars in our galaxy.
So what was this? What was it? What were we basing it on before Gaia? Were we?
It was, I suppose, mass and looking out there and various observations. And surveys have been done in the past, but it's the accuracy of Gaia. The fact it's looking at these 2 billion objects, and it doesn't just look at these objects once. It looks at each one of these objects 70 times, and so you can get, okay, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here. You can see how it's moving through space.
Wow.
And so it gets us a much more detailed view, and it's a game changer.
Yeah, and one thing I love about Gaia is that it actually is able to help us figure out like what stars were like swallowed up by the Milky Way that like weren't originally like deformed in the Milky Way, but they were part of other galaxies, and then our gravitational force of our galaxy actually like pulled it in, and it was like nom nom nom, like Hungry Hippos, like that game where it's like nom nom nom, I'm gonna grab it. I grabbed it into my galaxy.
Yes.
Yeah,
you're ours now.
That can help us. Yeah, so that can help us understand, like, okay, we know that this star came from a different galaxy. Does it have different signatures? Is it composed of different things? Is it, what's the velocity? All of these different things, like these parameters that we can study about a star, and that, just helps us, all of these things that we put into space, right? Just keep helping us learn so much more about our own origins and what else is out there, and like how did the universe form? How did these galaxies really form? Right? All these like big huge questions that humanity has asked forever.
And we're getting the answers.
Slowly but surely.
We're getting there slowly.
Yeah, but one of the things I love to say is we only know what 6% of the universe is made of.
Oh, right.
The other 94%, we have no idea. We call it dark matter. Yeah. We call it dark energy. We give it these euphemisms because we don't know what it is.
Yeah, we don't know.
And so we have a long way to go. Any kids listening?
I thought you scientists had it all figured out. I thought dark matter was this whole thing. Okay, so it's
it's just a name we give it because we don't know what it is.
We don't know what it is, and it's like, I mean, so as Maggie was saying, with these astronomical scales, with the stars moving and how big these galaxies are, and all these things, like our understanding of the universe is so small because it's so astronomically like it's such an astronomically large thing to figure out.
But also, one of the things I love is how our knowledge of the universe has changed. Because there's been an evolution in ideas. Because if you go back to the ancients, they thought that the Earth was the centre of the universe. Because you could see the sun rise, you could see the sun set. Everything seemed to be revolving around us. And then people looked a bit closer and said, oh, that doesn't make sense. Look at these things. They're not adding up. And so, oh, no, we have the heliocentric universe. Yeah. So then the sun was the centre of the universe. And then sort of people looked again and started using telescopes. And, oh, no, hold it. Things are going round in ellipses. And, oh, no, we're not the centre of the universe, there are other stars out there, and each one of those pinpricks of light is a sun like our sun. And then we have things like Gaia saying there's 300 billion stars, and sort of what that Hubble did, looking at sort of out there and realising that there were many, many billions of galaxies. One of the things that the Hubble Space Telescope gave us was an understanding that in the whole of the universe there is about 200 billion galaxies. So we're looking and talking about the Milky Way. That's one of 200 billion galaxies out there, and each galaxy is a collection of stars just like our sun.
Yeah. And so the year is 2024, but if we go back 100 years to 1924, that was when we first discovered that there were other galaxies like of our size and content, because Hubble, so like the Hubble Space Telescope, was able to measure the distance. Was able to measure the distance to the Andromeda Galaxy. And it's only 100 years ago that we learned this, right? It's just, for us, we're like, yeah, obviously, like, we're one galaxy and all these galaxies in this universe, but we didn't know that until 100 years ago.
It's crazy, because it's just, you think about you think it's so permanent, and we're learning as we go.
Yeah, but what I find exciting is with things like the James Webb and other things that are being launched, how will ideas change? So we're taking things for granted. Oh yeah, the universe is like this. It's probably very different, and our ideas will continue to evolve. But that's why we need bright young engineers and a variety, a diversity of people coming in and helping us solve the challenges. Yeah,
and I mean, Camille, I suppose that cues you up. No pressure or anything.
No pressure.
But moving from the European Space Agency to your side of the pond there, Camille, I'd love to talk more about NASA's Artemis program to bring humans to the moon. I know it's not quite as far out there as some of the globular clusters that we could be talking about, but
it's far for humanity. It's far for humanity.
So, basic question: why are we aiming to go back to the moon now, having already done it?
Okay. It's not a basic question. I think it's a really profound question that a lot of us are debating.
I appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So it's actually a really debated topic in the industry itself. For a while we were like, let's go straight to Mars. And then we were like, wait, well, maybe we should think about the moon first, right? And then now this whole Artemis campaign is moon to Mars. And so that is truly the essence of going back to the moon. We, ultimately, as explorers, as these curious, creatures that our species is, we're going to take that step to Mars. It's inevitable. It's just a matter of how do we actually do it? And there are so many things about living and working in space that we do not understand. We have been obviously for since 1969, we've been sending people to the moon, and that only lasted a couple years. And then since 1972 to now, we've been focused on low Earth orbit. And we've been, the reason for that largely was, we sent people to the moon for this, political motive, right? The Cold War and winning the space race. And, but oh crap, we actually don't really understand how the human body responds to microgravity and the radiation environment. See, we have this nice atmosphere that blocks a lot of the radiation. It doesn't block all of it, so wear your sunscreen, but it does block a lot of it. But when you go even just right above the atmosphere where the International Space Station is, where these commercial space stations are about to go in a couple of years, there's a lot of radiation, and then you have the microgravity. So we said, okay, we need to figure out how does the space environment affect our human bodies? And so now we have a better understanding of it, and now we're like, okay, let's go to the moon. Let's go back, because there are, one, a lot of resources there, but two, it's a lot closer to home. It's a lot safer. It's a lot easier to get to. You can actually communicate in near real time. There's only a 2-second delay instead of 20 minutes.
Oh, is that how long it's going to be on Mars?
Yes, it's I think it's 18 minutes one way and back.
I mean, that gives a sense of the scale of it, doesn't it? Blimey.
Oh yeah, it's so far away, but the moon is 2 seconds. You wouldn't really even notice it. And so we're saying, okay, we need to let's go to the moon. It's safer, it's closer, all those things I just mentioned. And so what we can do is we can develop the technologies that we need in order to live and work long term in space, both traveling through deep space to Mars, but also once we live on the surface of Mars, we can develop these technologies in a closer environment to Earth, in a safer environment, in a place that, yes, we have already been. We know a bit about it. We have satellites there that are helping us do what we call reconnaissance for resource prospecting. And we can figure out where are the resources, right? We can go and we figure out where's the water, where are the metals that we want to extract from the moon, and for the water, create potable water. And then you can electrolyze that into hydrogen and oxygen, and you get breathable oxygen, and then you get hydrogen, which is a fuel. So then you can refuel your rockets, which then can help us go to Mars. So there's so many reasons.
Yeah, I love the idea of it being a stepping stone.
Yeah.
And also,
exactly.
I am an absolute lunatic.
Yeah.
No, I've always, and in fact, when NASA made this announcement, because one of the challenges is that mentioned that sort of last time people were on the moon was in 1972, and so far everybody that have been to the moon, they've been white, they've been male, and they've been American. And so when NASA made the announcement of Artemis, and Artemis is lovely because Artemis was the sister of Apollo, and so it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And they said, okay, we've got to mix it up. We need to send someone female. We need to send someone from a different ethnicity. Well, maybe it's sort of a non-American. And I'm saying, like, me, send me. but they're not returning my calls.
Ding,
but
ding.
like, tick, 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 yes, send me. They're not returning my calls, but I'm hoping. But we can do so much on the moon as well.
Yeah.
My dream scenario is to have a telescope in one of the craters of the moon. It's sort of one of these dark craters.
Me too.
Which you never see.
Why is this?
Because there are some craters on the moon which are sort of are so deep that they never see daylight, and so as they sort of go round, even when the sunlight is shining on the moon, these craters.
So deep.
And so you could do optical astronomy with a telescope there, 24/7. The gravity is, I think, a sixth of the Earth's, so you could get a huge optical telescope, and that's my retirement plan. I'm retiring to the moon.
Now, another thing that I want to mention is that for us to go to the moon and then eventually to Mars, and something that I am really, really, really deeply passionate about is how does that space exploration to the moon and eventually to Mars help Earth and help all of humanity, no matter where we're at in the solar system or beyond. There's a lot of things that we can learn and a lot of technologies that are already being developed for the moon that are going to help us combat climate change. They're going to help us be able to do everything from growing food in really harsh environments, which is becoming increasingly a problem, because if we can learn to grow food on the moon in that soil, in that environment, maybe what we learn from that and how plants and food and everything really function in those environments, we'll be able to learn a lot more about how we can make food better here on Earth. We can, figure out better solar power. We can figure out better power in general. Like there's so many different applications that technology is then being funneled back to Earth. And that's a huge component of the space industry that I think a lot of people often forget because they're like, oh, we're going to the moon to leave Earth. Like we're going to the moon to explore and okay, goodbye. But no, it's really that we are going to explore. We are curious beings. Like that's just, we're explorers. That's just who we are. But what can we learn from that will make humanity and life better for all of us here on Earth? I
think that's really interesting. I actually I had a conversation with my friend the other day about, and one of the things he said, I was talking basically about the Apollo missions. I'm really obsessed with the old Apollo missions and stuff, and I was talking about how great they were.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. Well, I think in this call it would be a good chance of it. But one of the things he said, possibly to just shut me up because I might have been going on a little bit too long, was that he didn't see he was one of those people I think who didn't sort of see the point in space exploration and didn't view it as a good use of our sort of like planet's resources. So it was really interesting to hear you talk about sort of the very practical aspects of what we're doing, and especially regarding things like climate change. Maggie, I wonder what you would have said if I had you in my corner that day.
Yeah, I'd have been ready.
Yeah, you'd have been absolutely rings off. Like, let's just get going.
Right, let's go. We're going in. Because I think this is something that comes up a lot. And it's quite interesting because if I look at my career as a space scientist and things I've worked on, I have worked on things like sort of the James Webb Space Telescope, largest space telescope ever, and it looks into deep, dark space, gathering that infrared of radiation. But most of the stuff I've worked on have been been Earth observation satellites.
Right.
So satellites that help us get a better understanding of our planet.
Right.
Satellites that are used to sort of get a better understanding of climate change. Things like the European Space Agency's Aeolus mission.
Yeah.
This was looking at wind speed in the Earth's atmosphere, because wind is one of the... it helps better weather prediction, but it also gives us an understanding of how our climate is changing. Disaster monitoring constellation, a group of satellites that do Earth observation, and when there's a disaster, they send pictures from the affected area, because you can sort of fly over, get the images from the affected area, send them out to the United Nations, to people on Earth, so they can help people. And also, there's just so many ways that space helps us. But I think the problem is the headlines are, the James Webb Space Telescope, or people in space, and they're a very small proportion of what is actually being done.
Okay.
And so, but it is, as Camille said, that pioneering spirit. You were talking to sort of two people who sort of are sold into that, and as a result are developing technology that is used in space, but also used right here on Earth. My final one is, my favourite is, back in 25th of December 1968, there was the Apollo 8 mission. And the Apollo 8 mission was flying over the moon's surface. And the Apollo 8 was a precursor to Apollo 11. So they didn't actually land on the moon, but they did everything else.
They looped round it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Looped round it and then sort of came back home.
Yeah.
But on this December, they were flying over the moon's surface. And as they were doing, they saw the Earth rising in front of them. And I've actually seen the telemetry of them saying, hey, pass me that camera. I've got to take a picture of this. And pass me the colour film. This is so glorious. And they took this picture, and it's called Earthrise.
Yeah.
And many people think that this picture was responsible for the environmental movement, because when you saw the Earth in the deep, dark blackness of space rising up above it, people suddenly thought our planet is vulnerable. We need to look after our planet.
Right.
And so it triggered a whole new sense of well-being for our planet. And so without sort of travelling out in space and seeing that view, I'm sure we would have had some sort of environmental movement, but it really does drive it home. It gives us a different perspective.
Fascinating. Around 1,000 years ago, Chinese astronomers made note of a so-called guest star that appeared in the sky during the day for nearly a month. This phenomenon has been the subject of much interest by astronomers ever since, including from the 3rd Earl of Rosse, who in 1844 published a drawing of his observations, featuring streams running out like claws in every direction. In the years that followed, with better equipment, Rosse would ruefully comment on the inaccuracies of his original sketches. But by that point, the name of the Crab Nebula had stuck. So when I first read about this, and I learned up about the Crab Nebula, and we talk about it a little bit in the building instructions, I read that the neutron star in the middle of it rotates at 30 times a second. Okay, so that made me feel really anxious. I don't know why. I just felt really sort of like... I just couldn't quite wrap my head around the idea of a star turning around 30 times in a second. But I just wonder, are there any things that you've discovered about space, perhaps while simultaneously inspiring you, that have also kind of freaked you out?
So I am actually, this is really weird, maybe not so weird. Maybe there are people listening who are like, yeah, me too, duh. I'm actually way more terrified of our oceans than I am of space. And we actually know very little about our oceans, right? And maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But and they're local.
They're nearer, closer.
And they're local. Oh my gosh, no. I just, like, the idea of going into the deep ocean, like, even with full scuba gear, like, pretending like, I'm in a spacesuit, just terrifies me compared to, like, oh, absolutely, like, I could go up and be in a spacesuit and walk around, like, outside of the International Space Station. Now, I will say that, like, it would absolutely terrify me if I accidentally, like, floated away and just went into oblivion. Like, that would terrify me. But I think, no, honestly, like, I'm so fascinated by what is out there, the potential for us to find new life, whatever that life may look like, because it's probably not going to look like us.
No.
And, find new worlds that are just, like, unbelievable, or find new stars that are spinning at 30 rates a second. I just, yeah, I don't know. I'll end it with that.
So, Maggie, is it fair to say that if the more you know about space, perhaps the easier it becomes to sort of wrap your head around it? Or is it sort of like the more you discover, it does make it... Are there more things to sort of wig you out a little bit?
Yeah, Yeah, actually, I think to me, I think there are two types of people. Because I go and do lots of public speaking.
I don't think I'm going to come across well in this analogy.
No, actually, there's two types of people. Because there are some people, and I sort of say, yeah, 300 billion stars, 200 billion galaxies.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And some people sort of, whoa, that's too much. It's too much to take in.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
I know, but it's just a different perspective.
Yeah.
And the way I try and sell it is, it is huge and it's overwhelming, but it means we are part of something amazing. And I love that because we are part of this cosmos. The stuff that's made in the heart of stars is the stuff that's in us. And so, yeah, it is scary and it is daunting and it is overwhelming, but we are part of this stuff.
Yeah.
And sitting here from our little vantage on this rock, we can look out and try and understand it and interpret it. Yeah. But I do quite understand because it is overwhelming. And I think sometimes the devil's in the detail. The more you find out, you say, whoa.
Yeah.
There's things like, there's vampire stars.
Okay, please, what are vampire stars? Are they any freakier than stars that can spin 30 times a second? Because if so, I might need to refill my water before.
Okay, yeah, you might have a gulp or two before we get.
Okay, here I go.
But actually, talking about that star spinning, it's actually a collapsed star, and so this collapsed star is probably about sort of 30 kilometers. So about sort of I'm trying to do it in miles, but it's sort of about maybe sort of 10, 20 miles in diameter, and it's the collapsed core of a star, and it's one of the most gravitationally dense things in the universe, apart from black holes. And they spin and they send out sort of beams of radio waves, and we pick them up and we call them pulsars because each time they spin and they send out this beam of waves, we pick up one of the pulses. So that's sort of the neutron star at their heart, or a pulsar. But yeah, the vampire stars you often get stars in binary systems, and what you can have is in the binary system, if one star is bigger than the other, it will actually start leaching the atmosphere of another star, and it starts sort of stealing the stuff of the next door neighbour star, and it can do this. I know, it's like those hungry hippos again, but and it's seems quite imagine the other star saying, "Get off, leave me alone." No, you're mine now. So there are some freaky things out there.
I love how we're sort of like we are advancing the study of hungry hippo-based astronomy in this call.
Yes. I think it's going to become like my new mascot or something.
Someone is writing a PhD right now. It's like, this is it. This is what I was missing. Okay. So the LEGO art set also pays tribute to one of the most sort of recognisable spectacles in our galaxy, the Pillars of Creation in the Eagle Nebula, made famous by the Hubble's telescope photographs in 1995. So they're obviously visually astonishing, and I think we'll come on to sort of like the artistic element of them in a second. But first of all, what's actually going on here? What are we looking at when we see the Pillars of Creation?
So the Pillars of Creation are these sort of projection lights, but they are huge, and again, so we're talking huge on an astronomical scale.
Okay, big for the universe.
Yes, and so if you look into them, they're sort of like fingers almost projecting into this nebula, and they're clouds of dust and gas. And so one of the things I find fascinating is as an astronomer, I'd say I trip the light fantastic. Because, which sounds slightly wacky, but if you look at it with visible light, you see these columns, and it's like quite smoky. But if you look at it in infrared, you can see inside it, and that's one of the things that the James Webb Space Telescope does. You can look inside these columns, see past the dust, and you can see stars being born in these pillars. Now, in just one of the nodules, one of the little bits of the pillars, that's about the size of our solar system, and the actual main pillar is it's sort of light years, many thousands of light years across. But we call it stellar nurseries because this is where new stars are being born. Stars, like people, they go through life cycles, so they're born, they live, and they die, and depending on the mass of the star will depend on how it dies. So some stars go supernova, release all their matter into the universe, and then more stars are born out of that. And so that's what's happening in these Pillars of Creation. It's a stellar nursery where new stars are being born.
Camille, I saw your reaction there when you were talking about the James Webb Telescope. It's just like, I mean, what is it like at the moment to be studying these photos that are just coming out, and you're just like working in the field? And
my reaction was like the Pillars of Creation. in the infrared light that the James Webb Space Telescope captured, I get chills talking about it. It's just beautiful. Like you can, you see the pillars of creation from Hubble, right? And you see it in the visible spectrum. So there's different spectrums of light, right? On the electromagnetic spectrum. You see it from Hubble in this visible spectrum, and it's 7,000 light years from Earth. So that light, the light that we're seeing when we capture it from James Webb is like, we're seeing light that is 7,000 years old. We're literally looking back into time. And then you get James Webb, and James Webb sees in infrared, and it helps us see, how these stars are being born. Infrared helps us see, way, way, way back into the beginnings of our universe. And actually James Webb has helped us see, the first light, the first galaxies after the Big Bang. But in terms of the pillars of creation, it's like you're kind of, if you compare the Hubble and the Webb photos, and actually there are simulations out there that it's kind of like you can drag your cursor across, and it basically just like lifts that veil of like glass, of gas and dust. And because infrared light actually can penetrate through that gas and dust, and then you get all of those stars that are being born in there. It's just, it's such a beautiful image. And for everyone listening, if you haven't seen those two, like you absolutely have to go see them, and do find the one that you can drag the cursor and just like lift that veil off of it.
But also the pillars of creation might not be there forever, because there is a supernova has gone off in that area, but we don't know the results of that. But it's just like you must never look at the sun, but it takes 8 minutes for light to come from the sun and reach us. And so, but because this is so far away, it takes a lot longer for that light to reach us. So the pillars of creation might not be there any longer. And so we must enjoy them and sort of appreciate them.
Well, okay, on this so they do look, I was going to say they do look like artwork, and they look like something to appreciate. Camille, I was when researching this, one of your stated aims with the Galactic Gal program is to sort of educate your followers about the importance of STEM and art. Is this related? Is this the kind of thing that's related, or is it something slightly different?
Yeah, in terms of STEM and art, no, it's absolutely, it's part of it. I went to an arts boarding school and played trumpet professionally, and that lights up the right side of your brain, and then the technology, the STEM, lights up your left side of your brain. And I think it's so beautiful when both of them like overlap. And there's so many things. So going way back to the beginning, when Maggie was talking about how sci-fi is like a very real part of a lot of scientists and a lot of engineers and technologists careers, is because you have these artists that are creating what is in, these people's brains. If you look at the history of like how, artists have created these things in sci-fi, or artists have created these renders of these spacecraft, it actually a lot of times informs what the spacecraft ends up looking like, or what the technology ends up looking like, because then the engineers will be like, okay, it's like it's in their head, right? So it's a fascinating phenomenon to me that a lot of the times, like these renders, these like artistic creations that are made for whatever purpose, end up like driving the design of the technology. So I think that's one tiny aspect of STEM and art. But the big thing for me is that it helps us communicate. Like art is fundamentally like human, right? It's math and physics and all these things are like laws of our universe, but art is like how we're able to communicate those laws of the universe, and how we're able to communicate, the data that we're seeing. So actually all these photos that are coming back from these telescopes are just like zeros and ones, right? They're just pixels. They're just data. And then when we put them into artistic formats, right? Like, and oftentimes these images are colored, because so Hubble only sees light in black and white. Yeah. So then we apply colors to them to help us understand, and they're not fake. It's not like, me on my iPad drawing like just whatever colors I want. They're not fake. They're actually like, scientifically based, but it helps us see things in such a different light, like no pun intended, but it helps us see things differently. It helps us understand what we're looking at in a way that if you just looked at the zeros and ones that were coming in from these telescopes, you would be like, what the heck am I seeing?
Yes, but it's like the James Webb Space Telescope is an infrared telescope. We can't actually see infrared light with our eyes. Right. You can feel it on your skin because it feels warm, but we can't actually see infrared light. And so when we get this data back from the James Webb, we have to translate it into something. Yeah. And so we look at at the different wavebands and say, okay, let's take that waveband and make that red. Let's take that waveband and make it blue. And so, and it just generates something beautiful. And there's been many spacecraft that have been launched with onboard cameras, not to do science, but just to take glorious images. Because when we look out into the universe, things are so beautiful.
Yeah.
And that creativity runs across all subjects. Creativity is one of those things that's fundamental to everything. And so it's wonderful to see that and appreciate it. And I think more and more as space scientists, we want people to say, okay, this is fantastic data and we can learn a lot about the universe, but look how fantastic it is.
Yeah.
It's mind-blowing too.
I suppose it's such a great way to inspire people into your fields of study.
Well, yeah, but just for people, because I always think astronomy is one of the oldest sciences. Yeah. I always imagine sort of cave people, by the fire, before they could even speak, because it was just the wonder of the universe.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to tap into that. We almost, with all our streetlights and things like that, we keep our heads down, we look at our phones, we don't look up anymore. Yeah. But when we do, and we go somewhere amazing where there's clear skies, it makes our hearts sing. So we need to do more of it.
And look at, like the Earthrise photo, and Maggie was talking about how, many people think that drove the environmentalist movement. That's art. It's a photo. It's art. It's it's what was able to communicate what those astronauts saw with their own eyes. And now, a lot of people, most people around the world have seen that photo in some way, shape or form. Yeah. And it then creates these movements. It helps humans, see things in a different light, because the STEM movement, science, technology, engineering, and math, everyone knows that acronym, right? It's the STEM movement that completely took out the human aspect. The human aspect is art. That's creativity, and art is again how we communicate, the laws of the universe and stuff. We took that out, and so now what we're trying to do is put that back in. Yeah. And the new acronym is STEAM. Yes. Of course, it's controversial.
STEAM.
Everything is controversial, but it's STEAM. So science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. So we put the humanity back into, these fundamental laws of the universe.
Well, it's certainly very relevant for this set, I would say, in terms of having art.
I was going to say, because this is an ideal example. Yeah. Because with this Lego set, it is the glory of the Milky Way, our galaxy. Yeah. And yet it's sort of displayed in an artistic way. So people, and also sort of visually and sort of also tactile as well. Yeah. So one of the things I love about it is sort of you can feel it, experience it in many, many different ways. Yeah. And that's what it should all be about.
I agree.
Absolutely. And then it's truly a combination, because you're kind of an engineer, right? You're building things. You're taking them apart and seeing like how that was built, and you're redoing it, and you're creating new things. So it's very much, you're an engineer, but you're also making art at the same time.
No, well, I'll let our designer know when I talk to him in a second.
It's a thumbs up from us.
It's a thumbs up. At the centre of the Milky Way, 26,000 light years from Earth, is Sagittarius A star, a supermassive black hole with a mass 4 million times that of the Sun. Black holes are collapsed astronomical objects with such intense gravitational pull that not even light can escape once it reaches the event horizon. When exactly does a black hole stop being a black hole and become supermassive?
Well, just starting with the term supermassive black hole, it sends shivers down my spine. Right. Whoa, no, not just black hole, because black holes are weird enough as it is, but supermassive.
Supermassive.
And I think the demarcation point, or where the line is drawn in the sand, is we usually talk about things in terms of solar masses. Yeah. So the mass of our sun. So to get a black hole, a traditional black hole, you need to be maybe 20, 50 times the mass of our sun. But that can go way up to 100,000 times the mass of our sun. Right. So our sun is 99.9% of all the mass in our solar system is concentrated in the sun. So the planets don't play much of a part. Most of that mass is concentrated in the sun. And so we're talking about things thousands of times more massive than the sun. But it's that 100,000 mark that really is the demarcation.
And we recently managed to take a photo of it.
Yes.
Camille, you're going to love this question. How?
You're gonna love this answer. We created a Earth-sized virtual telescope using the Event Horizon telescope. So I think it was about 8 telescopes around the world, and they all were able to take a quote picture. They're not pictures. Again, it's zeros and ones. It's I believe I'm radio waves probably.
Yeah.
And we captured this data and we put together. I think it was 8. Hopefully that's the right number. But we put together all of this data from the Event Horizon telescope and created an Earth-sized virtual telescope to capture this photo.
As an astronomer, sort of bigger is better. Because the bigger your telescope, the more light you can gather. But a big telescope, and so I've worked on some amazing telescopes, things like the VLT, the Very Large Telescope.
Brilliant.
So that's
what a name.
4 8-meter telescopes. And recently I visited the ELT, the Extremely Large Telescope, which is a telescope 39 meters. Now, these are ground-based telescopes. But as well as gathering more light with these telescopes, what you also get is something called resolution.
Yeah.
And as Camille said, by having these telescopes at different points across the Earth, it means that you have what we call a longer baseline.
Yeah.
So when you see resolution means that if you see 2 objects which are really close together, if you don't have much resolution, they just come as a fuzzy blob and you don't actually see them as 2 separate objects.
Yeah.
But when you have telescopes, they don't have to be a whole telescope, but you just have an image taken from here, simultaneously taken over here, and so the time stamping is really important.
Okay.
Then suddenly you can see more detail and sort of get those little fiddly bits which you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. So that's why the Event Horizon Telescope was so important, because it could get the fundamental detail. But the problem is, black holes, or even supermassive black holes, the gravity is so strong, not even light can escape. So what are we photographing?
Right. Yeah.
So that's one of the challenges. People sort of postulated the idea of having black holes out there, but it's like, yeah, we know they're out there, but we can't actually see them because not even light can escape them if the light is within a sphere called the event horizon. But what you can do is, because the black hole is so gravitationally dense, it means that other things will respond to that dense gravity. And so I've seen sort of computer simulations and things like that, or actually real data taken of stars in the vicinity of a black hole. They're outside the event horizon, so they're not actually sucked into the black hole. But because of the gravity of the black hole, it's like a swarm of things moving around it. And you can see that the trajectories are curved around the black hole. So we don't see the black hole itself, we see things moving around it.
And that creates the sort of the dark circle in the middle?
Well, actually, so for the Event Horizon Telescope, what we're seeing is, as things are sucked into the black hole, they release radiation. So this is before they're being accelerated towards the black hole because of this supermassive gravity that it has. And so they release radiation because they're traveling at relativistic speeds. They release radiation. We can see that radiation, but we can't see the black hole. And so the black hole is actually that shadow in the centre, but we can see radiation as things get sort of leached and sucked in to the black hole itself.
But one thing I read about Sagittarius A star is that it was dormant. Does that mean, Camille, that it's not sucking in anything anymore? Is it just chilling? What is it?
I'm going to let Maggie answer that one.
What's going on?
I just listened to her talk about Sagittarius A.
Okay, yeah.
We know it's still there.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Well, see, the thing is, it could have sucked in everything within sort of, spitting distance, if you see what I mean. And so things will be still sort of roving round it.
Yeah.
And they'll probably be travelling at very, very high speeds because of this massive gravity.
Yeah.
But yes, I think... because also, as we said at the beginning, looking at something like Orion, the universe isn't static. So even if it's sucked in sort of things in its vicinity, more stuff will be travelling through, bumbling along and, hey, what's that? Oh no, it's a supermassive black hole. No! And then they get spaghettified. Sorry. Yeah. I love the term spaghettified. They get elongated into a piece of string as they go in. So
there's some descriptive elements in the space world.
Yes, spaghettification is actually a scientific term.
Oh, that's real. That's in the books, is it?
No, that really is a scientific term. And the things, if you get too close to a black hole, imagine you sort of go up to a black hole and you go feet first. As you pass through the event horizon, this is where you can't escape anymore. You get sort of, the gravity is so strong that the gravity at your feet is higher than the gravity of your head. And so you get elongated into a piece of string as you fall into the black hole. sounds excruciatingly painful, but it is spaghettification.
In the timeline of human existence, the question of extraterrestrial life has gone from being a radical one, suppressed on theological grounds by figures as far back as Plato, to being considered a statistical certainty by some, and an obsession for many in our culture. Depictions of alien life abound in our television programs, movie franchises, not to mention a fair few crop fields. So, Camille, you mentioned earlier on a little bit about finding life in the universe, or rather in our galaxy, and I'd like to sort of like dive into that a little bit more. So, a slightly unscientific question here, but what do you think are the prospects of us finding life in our galaxy?
Definitely not unscientific. The thing that like really fascinates me is that even if we did suddenly today get a radio wave or whatever signal from, you know, an intelligent species, there's so many things that factor into that. One, are they like us? Probably not. So, like, what signals are we getting, right? Are we looking for the right things too, right? Are we, which kind of, I digressed a little bit there, but are we looking for the right signals? Because we're looking right now for signals that we would give off, either, you know, through radio waves or from our biological signatures. Right. But that's probably not going to be what life looks like elsewhere. But then how do we define life, right? Because we define it as water, oxygen, things like that. So there's all these considerations, but there's also the consideration that we've been talking about periodically throughout this podcast of how far away things actually are. So if something is 7,000 light years away, or if something is 100,000 light years away, that signal has been traveling to us for that long, you know, at the speed of light, right? As signals travel. So let's say we get a signal from something 100,000 light years away. Not only do we have to collect that signal and then figure out all of our stuff, you know, with all of our processes and our government and our science and our public and all that kind of stuff, then let's say it is like intelligent life, and we decide that we're going to respond, right? It's going to take another 100,000 years to get back. Is that whatever it is that life, is that civilization, whatever it is, are they still going to be there? Probably not. Maybe they've moved on to another planet, another star, like assuming if they're, you know, intelligent like us and can, you know, have been able to contact another species, they're really far along in their progression as a civilization. And so maybe they can travel at the speed of light and go elsewhere. There's so many things that like I just are even just going through my head right now that we have to consider.
Well, given how many factors there are, do we reckon that should it be a priority for what we do in regarding sort of like space exploration?
In my opinion, I think that looking for life elsewhere in our solar system should absolutely be a priority. And it's not going to be life like us. We know that, right? But life like on a molecular level, on a biological, you know, fundamental level. Like we think that there could absolutely be life in the oceans on moons around Saturn, for example. And so, you know, as we're sending out these missions like Europa Clipper, where it's going to go to Europa, the moon, and kind of like fly down and look at, you know, all the atmosphere and stuff that's happening there. I think that is so important, because if we find like molecular life, cellular life on a different planet in our solar system, that fundamentally changes the equation about how humans got here and helps us learn about ourselves, right?
It's quite interesting, because there was a scientist called Drake, and he came up with the Drake equation. With the Drake equation, it was actually trying to answer this question, the probability of finding a civilized life within our galaxy. And it has various factors: the rate of star formation, how many of those stars actually have planets going around it. So Drake came up with this in the 1960s. And many of these factors we didn't actually know. And Camille, just as you said, one of the factors is how long does a civilization last? Right. And I always like to put it to kids that, you know, I imagine the aliens sort of landing on Earth, you know, spaceship door opens up, the aliens step out and they see dinosaurs. So they think, we don't like this, we're off. So if our civilizations don't overlap, then yes, we're not going to be able to communicate with them. And the thing is, and it's quite interesting, because our communication very much takes the form of our current technology. So if you look at the Voyager spacecraft, they had records on them, you know, golden discs.
records, yeah.
I know. It's just quite embarrassing now, considering we sent them a record. Yeah, hey, we sent them instructions of how to sort of construct something to read.
We did.
But it's just a bit embarrassing, how dated that technology.
So is it really just like we're basically just like if you don't have a vinyl record player?
Yeah, sorry, you
trouble.
can't communicate.
No, literally, it's like there's mathematical drawings on the record, trying to teach an alien civilization how to use it. But that there's so many things wrong with the golden records, I will say. I love them, but
they were of
it assumes so much about but it assumes so much about how that alien civilization would be able to understand those in the first place.
Yeah, they also had all those greetings, didn't they? From all the wasn't there something that sort of said to all the Turkey got to send their own greeting on the record, and didn't they say to all the Turkish speakers out there or something like that? That might be.
We are with you.
We'll have to fact check that, but
I haven't heard that, but that's funny.
My friend told me that the other day.
But actually, in terms of finding the aliens, there are some projects. There's a project that I've been excited about for a while called Breakthrough Starshot. Breakthrough Starshot is using an existing technology called a solar sail. But using it in a different way.
Yeah.
So solar sails are one of the ways we can travel through space and build up to quite big speeds. Because as Camille was saying, the distances, the distance between our solar system and the next door neighbour solar system, Proxima Centauri, is 4.28 light years, which is 40 trillion kilometres.
Which is, sorry, let me just do some calculations. A lot.
Yeah,
Cool.
In miles, it's still big.
Yeah.
And so using current technology, so travelling at 16 kilometres a second, it will take 76,000 years to go from our star system to the next door neighbour star system.
I just want to hop through a wormhole.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, a bit of shimmery water and
Didn't they think of that? Oh.
Yeah. So Breakthrough Starshot is using these solar sails, and we've used them in the past.
Yeah.
So it's effectively like a wind sail. It's a big sheet of metallized plastic. And I'm talking sort of acres.
Yeah.
And what happens is, in the past, we've used light from the sun. The photons from the sun hit the solar sail and accelerate it through space. But what Breakthrough Starshot wants to do is they want to use lasers. So turn off the power to a major city, fire up a bank of lasers. They shoot their photons up into towards the solar sail. The photons hit the solar sail and accelerate it to a fifth of the speed of light. So if we could use this technology, travelling from our solar system to the next door neighbour solar system, we could do it in 20 to 30 years.
Whoa.
But this is, it's just down to the engineering now, which of course the devil's in the detail. I know. And the probe we can send can weigh no more than about 1 gram. So we are trying to develop these technologies. So if we could do this, we can accelerate the solar sail, but we can't slow it down. So as it flies past this planet at a fifth of the speed of light, it needs to grab photographs, as many as, and then beam them back to Earth. And because even travelling at that speed, even travelling at the speed of light, so the radio waves would travel at the speed of light, it would take 4.28 years to get the images back to Earth. But it does mean that in the next 30, 40 years, we might actually be able to image some of these exoplanets. So we're not going there, but we might image them.
Globular clusters can contain millions of stars bound tightly together by gravity. We've typically located them in the very outer regions of the Milky Way, in our galactic halo, which leads me on to my next question. So what is the very edge of how far we'll feasibly be able to travel into space in the future?
I think that's really, really far away. I think right now we got to figure out how to get to the moon again.
Theoretically, is it even possible? Well,
using current technology, 76,000 years to the next door neighbour star. So hibernation.
Yeah, I suppose.
Technically, you can, put a human in a spacecraft and they
Voyager
could go.
3.
It would not be great at all. And eventually, you're going to run into power issues. So then you would stop using solar panels at a certain distance, right? And so there is one fundamental thing that we really need to solve, and that's gravity. Two things. So gravity and radiation. So going way back to the beginning of this conversation, we need to figure out how to shield spacecraft from radiation, or we need to cure cancer, because once you get up there, you're being bombarded by radiation, and no amount of sunscreen is going to help you out there. And then 2 is the gravity effect. So any type of stay in space, long-term stay in space, like over, a couple weeks, a couple months, results in like really, really debilitating side effects.
Okay.
And the longer you're in that zero gravity environment, the harder it is to reverse those problems. So your entire body changes because we have evolved to live in gravity, in 1G, 9.8 meters per second squared, right? We're not used to we are not designed to live in zero. We are not designed to live in 1/6 or 1/3 G, which is the moon and Mars, respectively. But what we're doing right now is really trying to understand, one, does the existence of a little bit of gravity, the existence of lunar gravity, 1/6G, does that eliminate a lot of the side effects that we would have otherwise living in zero gravity for a long period of time? Or do we need 1/3 G, or do we need the full 1G? Once we figure that out, then we need to figure out how to develop artificial gravity space stations. And some people are working on this right now. And basically, it's very sci-fi. And so it goes back to our art conversation too, that the way that these, if you look at 2001: A Space Odyssey, the way that these the artificial gravity stations, the wheels, right, the big von Braun wheels is what they're called, is that going to really drive what an artificial gravity space station looks like in the future? We don't know. But so people are working on artificial gravity. It's a huge problem to solve. We need to figure out how to spin a space station. We need to figure out what gravity to spin it at. We need to figure out how to keep it stable. So there's all these things, but I think that is critical. That and the radiation problem, whether that's curing cancer or figuring out a way to solve, radiation concerns, is what we're going to have to figure out even to go to Mars, right? And so I think we will see people on Mars in this lifetime.
Here's the question.
But I don't.
Yeah, so what NASA has said, the first person to land on Mars is alive today. I'm hoping it's me, but it's probably not. But yes, so the first Martian is alive today, so they're out there.
Yeah,
it's quite interesting.
It is. Yeah, they are.
This is such an exciting time for sort of space exploration.
It's exciting. It's complicated, but it's really exciting. And there's so many things, not only the technological aspect of it that we've been talking about here, but the international collaboration and the regulatory framework. So space law is becoming a huge field. Yeah. There's just so many things to think about. So it's super exciting. It's super complicated, but it's a challenge that we're meeting today.
One of my fears with space travel has been the desire of my life. But one of my fears is I don't want people left behind. I don't want the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
That there's a sort of the people who are rich because yes, we live in space.
Yes.
And then there's sort of and that's often explored in sci-fi as well. And that's and it's one of the challenges we face even today, and it's something the United Nations is taking on. Space should truly benefit everyone on our planet. And so whether it's Earth observation or developing new technology, it should be used for everyone. And I don't think we're there yet. So that's one of the big challenges I see in the future.
But does it speak to, looking back to sort of the 1960s, 1970s, we were speaking about how space exploration was sort of the realm, and space exploration, and maybe to some extent sort of like the science behind it, was the realm of sort of like white men. Do you find that at the moment, where are we at the moment? Are you sort of pleased with the direction that we're at? How much progress has there been in your lifetime? And I'm interested to hear from both of your perspectives. Big questions.
I mean, I will say, like, it's small steps in the right direction.
Yeah.
So even on my, on a tiny little scale, when I graduated college, I was one of 2 women in my graduating class.
When was that, if I may ask?
2019. So just 5 years ago.
Right.
So in those 5 years now, my alma mater has at least a dozen, if not 20 or more women in the aerospace graduating class. And so it's little steps in the right direction. Sending the first woman, the first person of color to the moon on Artemis 2. And then, hopefully sending more nations. All of these new countries suddenly have access to space that they've never had before. But there are a lot of European countries out there that are getting access to the International Space Station and sending their ESA astronauts up on these commercial missions, these private missions, that otherwise they wouldn't have really had an opportunity to go on a government mission. There's a fundamental psychological change that happens when you go to space called the overview effect. And it's like seeing the Earth rise, right? It's seeing the planet from that perspective fundamentally psychologically changes your brain chemistry. And you come back down, or for most people, but you come back down and you have this new sense of, this new awe for the world, this new perspective on the world, on humanity. Absolutely. And so I think that the more people we get into space to see that, the better our world will be. But we have a lot of work to do to get there.
Yes, because I think getting more people into space is important. But then at the same time, we need to make the space industry and space transportation more environmentally friendly as well.
Right.
Which is a challenge.
Yes.
Because with all of these things, it's sort of, and people are coming up with sort of biofuels, space biofuels and things like that. But but looking at that sort of arc, I've been sort of working in the space industry for a number of years. I think sort of black female scientists in the space industry is still quite rare.
Right.
And when I was doing physics at university, I think we had a huge cohort, 200 students at Imperial College in London. And I think there was a black guy, so there were 2 black people, and there were 5 girls. I was the overlap in the Venn diagram. And it is getting better. And the sort of work that sort of Camille is doing and going out and sort of sharing sort of experiences and passions and showing how the relevance of it is so important. So, but as you say, it's baby steps. And the thing that worries me is we are moving in the right direction, which is a big positive, but it's too slow. Space is too important to be left to just sort of such a small demographic. Space, especially in the future, is going to influence our life in so many different ways. And so it's like AI and all these other technologies. If it's just done by a small demographic, it is very much sort of polarized that way. And it means it doesn't really work for everyone. So, and also one of the problems with the space industry, people think, oh yeah, you need the brain the size of a small planet to work in the space industry. And of course, that's not true. We have scientists, we have engineers. Camille was talking about space law. Big challenge for the future. We need lawyers, we need PR people, we need everyone. We need people asking questions.
Podcast hosts.
Quite. This is all part of it. Just sharing that and asking the right questions. So we need so many different types of people working in the space industry. It's not just about scientists and engineers. It's about everybody, because this is our future.
Amazing.
Yeah. And
Sorry, I get a bit
different
excited.
countries, different.
Yes.
Me too.
And collaborating.
Me too. I mean, there's collaborating, international collaboration, and getting these countries that have never sent something to space, access to space, whatever that may be. But space is very expensive, and I think that's where we have a lot of work to do to ensure that it's a lot more affordable for people to be not only involved in the industry, but send things to space to help their countries. Because if you have most of the, as much as all of us are trying to send things to space to help the world, if a country sends things to space, obviously, that resource is going to go to that country first, right? And so then are we really giving the resources to the countries that really need them? It's just there's all these human considerations that we have to think about, and space gets such a bad rep all the time for the environmental aspect of it. You're just going to leave us behind. Yeah, but it's so important that we go out and we do things like this. We do podcasts, we educate, we talk to people. I mean, we're all in 3 different countries here, and you guys are in Europe and I'm in the US. That's incredible. That it's a small step in the right direction, right?
Oh, that's such a lovely way to frame this podcast. I really appreciate that. And now it's my absolute pleasure to bring in our very own Lego designer, Adam Vaughan, to talk us through all the cosmic detailings of this wonderful set. Adam, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Jack.
So what what was your sort of philosophy when creating this incredible set? It's, by the way, one of my favorite sort of sets. I'm not trying to sell it or anything. I really do think it's just stunning. But what was your design philosophy when you were creating this set?
There was three things that I really wanted it to achieve. The first was that I wanted it to be beautiful, truly beautiful, because it is an art set first and foremost. So I wanted it to be something that people want to have in their house and hang on their wall, and for that it needs to be beautiful. But then alongside that, aiming it at people who are astronomers, who are fans of stargazing, it needed to be technically correct, as technically correct as possible. And the third really is I wanted to showcase a sort of a new way of using Lego bricks as an art medium. And with that, I've kind of used this sort of greebling effect, which is something, it's a term that I believe was invented by Industrial Light and Magic, working on the first Star Wars films. When you imagine these sort of, these Star Wars spaceships, they don't have any smooth surfaces on them. They're all texture and little bits and pieces. It's very much like our backdrop here.
It's almost like we planned it, which we didn't.
But it's obviously something that's very popular in the Lego fan community to build that way.
Yeah,
as well.
I've heard sort of AFOLs referring to greebling quite a lot in terms of when they create sort of like various sort of things. So that was that like a core thing
I wanted to see, because I don't think we've really used it in Lego sets, perhaps outside of Star Wars, in any meaningful way before. So I wanted to see kind of what was possible and push what was possible with it.
Yeah, I've not noticed. I know we've had some 3D art sets, but not like this in terms of quite how much texture there is.
Yeah, it was actually sort of earlier in the process we were talking about this as potentially as a mosaic, as a more traditional mosaic. And then I sort of realised as a team that there was an opportunity to do more with it, and that's when the greebling technique came in.
Why is that? Why did you?
Just because just to make it something with a bigger wow factor. I guess it was the aim there. It was something that from a distance you think, oh, that's nice. That's a picture of the Milky Way, and as you get closer, you notice more and more.
I mean, I think that's come across incredibly well. It must have been nice as a designer to have also going back to your first point about trying to make something beautiful. That must be just a brilliant brief to get. Yeah,
absolutely. It's we try and do it with everything that we do in Lego art. Obviously, to make as beautiful products as possible.
And the colour makes quite a big part of that, doesn't it? So what are we looking at in terms of the colours?
So it's and I'm very lucky to have some colleagues who are very much into stargazing to lean upon with this. But there's certain, as I understand it, there's certain gases, in stars that can mean they're more to the blue side of the spectrum or the pink side of the spectrum. And that's what I really wanted to bring out in this. So sort of closer to the centre of the galaxy, you have all those pink colours, where you've got one type of gases, and as it goes out into the outer rings, the stars become more and more blue.
Right.
That's kind of and really, I've taken that and sort of oversaturated it, and also translated it into the Lego colour palette, to the colours we have available. So it becomes quite, I guess, extreme in its execution there.
Yeah, but as a sort of like creative direction. You mentioned it being technically correct. What parts of this are you most pleased about that you think you've nailed technically?
Well, I mean, there are some things then, a lot of the landmarks we know about the Milky Way are obviously quite close to where we are in our solar system because of our abilities to see things.
Yeah, we just can't see beyond them.
We can't see beyond. So a lot of the landmarks are kind of clustered in that one area, and because of how close they are together in relation to the scale of the whole Milky Way, there may be some things there that are actually, between one kind of Lego stud and the next is however many hundreds of light years. So there may be things that are actually a little bit out of place from that point of view, but they're as technically correct as they could be in a Lego model.
I suppose it's kind of like fun to work within the confines. That's where so much creativity sort of comes from, right? In terms of where you've, as you say, like one sort of like tiny stud, and you have to go to another corner of our galaxy.
Yeah,
it's great. Landmarks. Which were some of your personal favourites to build?
One of my personal favourites is the Pillars of Creation. Not so much in the build, but just in the discovering that during the research phase, and just how beautiful the photography is that we have of that. How amazing that something like that exists out there in the galaxy. Really kind of struck a chord with me. In terms of other, not so much a landmark, but a kind of a a feature. We have the Gaia Space Telescope there.
Yes, we've been discussing that actually.
My reason for incorporating that was that the Gaia Space Telescope is responsible for a lot of the images we have of the Milky Way, as I understand it. And I wanted to feature it, but not have it to dominate the picture. So just kind of a little nod to it on the side. And actually, it was a lot of fun. It was quite a process, but quite satisfying. Just coming up with the 3 or 4 elements that represented that in the right way, to kind of the right proportions, but keeping it just simple and a little.
Yeah, because there's only, is there like 5 elements?
Yeah, 5 elements of that
for a multi-billion-dollar spacecraft. I think it's a multi-billion-dollar telescope. I think you've done quite well there. Were there any, like the Gaia telescope? Were there any other sort of like little Easter eggs in there that our builders will be sort of like coming across now as they build?
So there's one thing that is a little bit hidden in there. There's a little alien head in there, sort of cartoonish alien head hidden in the build, and the reasons out there is just to kind of provoke the conversation, the discussion of, are we alone in the universe, or is there other kind of intelligent life forms out there?
So it wasn't technically correct, but it could be. Who knows?
Possibly, yeah, possibly.
We just need the Gaia telescope to sort of like turn and face that area of the galaxy. You never know what you might find.
Yeah.
Were there any? We've talked about some of your favourite parts already, but was there anything that you were really pleased with creating, and any parts of the set that you were really delighted to work on?
We talked a little bit about the Gaia Space Telescope, and that was quite satisfying. I do also really like the little bits. There's little bits of sort of space junk floating around here and there that are built out of 2 or 3 elements. Some binoculars and.
So the binoculars not mean anything in particular, just apart from it's kind of fun.
It's just sort of just kind of nodding at I needed some grey colours here and there, and I thought actually I can have some fun with the grey elements. So there's some kitchen whisks and some binoculars and bits and pieces that
I was like convinced it was going to be a telescope. I was like, that's Hubble, that's something. Compared to other Lego art sets that have been produced, did you get an idea of any of the sort of the unique challenges of this set?
I think one of the challenges unique to this set, because of the way it's designed with this greebling style, it looks reasonably random in the the use of elements and the placement of those elements. However, obviously, it's still got to be easy to follow a building instruction, and straightforward to build from that point of view. So I had a lot of great help from some really good colleagues who design our building instructions and coached me through that process, and actually how we avoid kind of elements that look similar to each other, and confusing steps during the building process, which is obviously something we do with every Lego model.
Right.
But because of the nature of this one and the way it's designed, I think it was that bigger challenge with it.
How do you on a basic level, how do you make sure that this all stays together when it hangs up on a wall?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
Quite lucky that we have these guys. We call them art plates.
Right.
It's essentially like a big Technic brick, 16 by 16 module big Technic brick that you can use other Technic elements to lock together. That makes a really, really strong canvas. Essentially for this, and particularly with this. This model, that canvas then sits inside quite a strong frame, and that holds the whole thing together and keeps it in one piece, ensures no bits drop off when someone hangs it on their wall.
Is it quite a heavy set compared to other Lego art? Do you know?
It is reasonably heavy. Yeah, it's certainly heavier than some of the mosaics we've done in the past with Lego art, because it's got more elements in it, more bricks and things. So.
Well, thanks to the plates then, I suppose. So you mentioned at the start of our chat that you weren't really into astronomy too much beforehand. Has this given you a new appreciation for our galaxy? Have you bought a telescope or anything?
I haven't bought a telescope yet, but it has definitely given me, I think, an appreciation for the beauty. Right. I'm not a particularly technical person from a scientific point of view, but
that is surprising to me, having seen your work.
It's definitely much more about the beauty of the imagery we have from space, and I think as well, I mean, it does give you some perspective, doesn't it? Like it's really difficult to perceive the scale of human life in relation to the whole galaxy, let alone the whole universe, and that gives you some perspective, I guess.
Well, I think that's a lovely way to finish. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And lastly, thank you to you at home for joining us on our journey from here on Earth to the outer reaches of our galaxy. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.